Christine, it's good to see you. I'm glad for this opportunity for us to talk about masks today.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Ronen, for setting this up.
And of course, the setup for this is that you and I are co-leading a workshop in Apex, North Carolina on May 24th, where we're going to spend a whole long day diving into the depths of the mask, what it is, how to become aware of it, and how to integrate it so that we're not prisoners of it, but actually witness it and work with it. So I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Excellent. Well, did you have any thoughts about how you want to open it up?
Well, I'd love to hear from you about what's your take on the mask? Like, what do you think? How does it show up in your life? And what have you noticed about masks, both your own and others? And I'll do the same. And we can kind of hopefully give our viewers and listeners a sense of what we're talking about when we say the mask with a capital T and a capital M.
Well, I think my sense of a simple answer of, for me, what the mask is it's how we act, it's how I act to make sure that I won't get hurt. So I wear my mask to impress people. I wear my mask to make people like me. I wear my mask to make people want to help me. I wear my mask to be good. And I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to this really deep belief and feeling that I need everyone to like me, because if they don't like me, they'll leave me. In my body, it feels like if they leave me, I'll die. Like when I trace that fear all the way down to the root, feels like death.
Yeah, the mask for me is similar. It feels like a very old survival mechanism. It goes back as long as I can remember. With, of course, my unique take on it. The mask for me is a mechanism for me to kind of reassure myself that I'm lovable. This kind of core fear at a very young part of my development that I was just not lovable. And if I create a mask, and I'm sure we'll want to talk about more of what that might look like, but if I create just the right mask for you, which may be a different mask than I create for that person over there or that person over there, then all of you will feed back to me in some way that I am lovable. Because if I'm not lovable, since we're drilling down to the core fear, if I'm not lovable, then I'm not welcome in this life. I'm simply not welcome as a human being if I'm not lovable. And that, of course, at that very young level in my development is radically terrifying. Radically terrifying. Oh my God, I don't belong here at all. I should just leave. So I think that's the impetus over the years to pick up on all of the clues that society gives us and develop the mask. And my own experience with my own mask is that I realized at a certain point in my life that I had a very malleable mask that I could put on in an instant, faster than I could think, for kind of assess the mask that was needed in the moment and then put it on. And what was particularly frightening is when I noticed it. It's like, oh my God, how terrifying is that? I've got this chameleon-like ability to, or addiction to putting on masks for this person, that person could change in a heartbeat.
And that's when you notice it. For me, I remember so long, I didn't even know I was wearing a mask. I just thought I was being myself. And I would catch it sometimes when I would listen to recordings of myself or see myself on video, which I hated hearing my voice, because I think then I could hear it. I could hear something false. And that felt really vulnerable to expose because I could feel the fear that was underneath it.
Oh, I went for decades without noticing my mask. Absolute decades. In fact, it was in a somatic, deep somatic process I was being led in by someone with similar training to that which you and I have. And all of a sudden, it was in a small men's retreat, very small. There were 8 of us, and all of a sudden, I spotted the entire mechanism, and I was terrified because I had lived for a half a century wildly unaware that I had been creating masks. And these were some of my closest friends on the planet. And I realized in an instant that I had a mask for each one of them. I had one for Roger, and for Hunt, and for Jean, and for Michael, and for Ford. I had a customized mask. And what really was frightening was 2 things. First of all, it had operated completely behind my eyeballs, outside of my conscious awareness. I was completely oblivious to it. And I realized that it was denying me intimate connection of any real sort. I could not be fully connected so long as I had this unconscious process that was hiding who I actually was from my closest friends and beloveds. I realized in that same instant that if I didn't do something about this, I would be desperately alone for the rest of my life. It's terrifying.
What happened in that moment? Do you have a memory of the flip when you suddenly saw it? What was going on?
Well, first of all, I gave him a name. I called him the Slippery MFer, except the full name. And it was, he was slippery. This dimension of my ego was so slippery. And what was frightening about it was, my first reaction was desperate fear, because I saw how fast he operated and how invisibly he operated. And I thought, boy, I'm not nearly fast enough or clever enough to do anything about this. I'm scared to death. And so, that fear led me toward a very serious undertaking. I started reading about it. And then I started going to the closest of these friends of mine and carving out time. About 3 months later, I went on a picnic with one of them, my friend Roger. I said, Roger, I got to tell you all sorts of things about myself that you probably don't know because I've been hiding from you. So we had this incredibly gorgeous, intimate conversation. I realized, I survived that. Good. Good. I'm ready for number 2. So another 3 months goes by. And then I talked to another friend that was in that same circle and had a similar heart-opening conversation where I just put that mask aside and I said, I want you to know me. And then about a month later, I went into counseling. And then my counselor then, because he was very well trained in these somatic practices and counseling generally that you and I have been trained in. And then that's when the real work started to happen. I had done a lot of reading for those 6 or 8 months. And then once I got into counseling, it was like, all right, let's roll up our sleeves and get down to work.
I'm curious what you shared with your friends. If you want to share, you don't have to.
Oh, sure. There were all parts of my emotional life that they didn't know about. My relational life that they didn't know about. Because part of it was I was presenting a certain version of my relational life that was simply not so. Happy in this relationship. Well, I wasn't. And I was acting out in response to that unhappiness, to that relationship. And all of that was in the dark, was in the shadows. And so then, I started there because it was the most dangerous. And then from starting with the most dangerous was my approach. Those conversations that I thought were more likely to have my friends back away from me, that's right where I went. And then once I went there, then I realized, I can also open up in all these other ways. How about for you? What are the what have you noticed as you've increasingly become conscious of your mask when it shows up?
Well, my mask superficially is maybe softer than yours sounds like it may have been. But now that I'm so much more centered in my authenticity, what I notice, and I just want to start with this part because it feels so good. I can feel the pleasure of it right now in my body, is that I can show up in social situations and I have so much fun. I just love being myself. I don't even know how to explain that feeling, but when my mask started to melt and I started to just feel like me and not, well, I guess I still was scared, especially at the beginning, but not so much that I would go back into my mask. I would just say, okay, I'm scared. And I learned how to tolerate fear and let it sit in the passenger seat next to me. It just opened up all this possibility for connection.
Yeah.
And the pleasure of that.
Mm-hmm.
So all the social anxiety that I had before, that I'd want to go, but I wouldn't want to go because it would take so much out of me and I'd have to, it's because I was pretending and it was stressful and it was hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I finally was able to release, not all of it, obviously, but enough, it just changed the way I have to show up in community, changed the way that I feel in my own body. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, and there's a freedom, the pleasure that comes for me, the pleasure that comes from being able to act freely and to speak freely. All the things that I was so afraid to tell even my closest friends, I'm very often able to tell them in public, in a whole group setting, to strangers. And the freedom to not have to so carefully measure my words out of fear. Now, of course, I still put on costumes. You know, I don't know that it would even be an aspiration of mine to get rid of all access to masks, because I do play particular roles in my life that require a certain way of being. For example, a couple of months ago, I testified as an expert witness in a health trial relating to my healthcare expertise. Well, there are things I will not say on a witness stand in an Arizona courtroom that I would say in this setting, talking with you on camera, or that I would say to my sons in an intimate conversation with them. But that being said, at least I'm conscious now about these masks. I think of them as adornment, as clothing. And so at least I can make conscious choices, as I did for that courtroom in Phoenix. It was like, oh, I'm going to dress like I didn't dress like this in Phoenix. I put on a different costume. I put on a suit and a tie and a pocket square and a freshly pressed white shirt on one day and a blue shirt on the next. I thought it all very carefully, but it was all conscious. And it's the unconscious mask that scares the dickens out of me, because then I don't get to make choices and then I don't get to be free.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about masks as I was getting ready for this. I poured my water into this mug so that people wouldn't see me drinking out of a bottle. You know, that's okay. But yeah, it's like, how much do we identify with our masks? How aware are we of our mask?
Right.
How conscious is it? Is it a choice? Or do we think that's who we are? And for me, that was really confusing, because my mask, one of my primary masks was very sweet, very sweet and very pleasing. And I am sweet. That's part of my essence. But when I was starting to look at my mask and dropping that sweetness, because I realized, oh, I'm being sweet right now to control the other person. And then what? And then what? If I'm not sweet, what do I do instead? So then I had this time of like, okay, well, I'm not gonna smile. That feels weird, but it doesn't quite feel like me. But I don't really want to smile right now. I'm not gonna act like super excited to see this person. That seems kind of cold and mean. That's not me, but I'd be faking it if I did that. So it was this confusing period where I had to sort of swing the pendulum from one side to the other. I had been sweet for so long. I just needed to stop that. And I think what confused me the most about the mask, but also was so magical about it, was that I realized that my mask was formed from my essence.
Right.
It's like I have this sweetness in me that's true and real. And when I got hurt, I took the tools that I already had and learned how to use them to try to control my environment and the people around me. And then I did that so well for so long, so automatically, like you say, that I forgot that I was even doing that.
I love what you say about the control piece. One of the early books I read, once I discovered this dimension of myself, this mask, was a book by Susan Campbell called Getting Real. And she talks about the distinction between speaking to disclose and speaking to control. Now, this book is primarily about communication, but the mask is not simply how my face looks. It can also be what I say. Am I saying this to control you or control your feelings about me? Or am I saying this to disclose something about me, which is an act of vulnerability? It's a vulnerable thing to disclose. And that can be extrapolated out to physical gestures, to behavior, all the way out. Am I doing this to control, or am I doing this to be authentic and to disclose who I am for you in an act of vulnerability? I think that's an important piece of this mask thing. As you said from the beginning, it is very often a safety measure. Another thing that came up for me as you were speaking about this is the vast majority of my clients are women. And I think for a variety of reasons, but I speak to a lot of women, I work with a lot of women. And as we explore the mask, there are a lot of commonalities that I think are generated by immersion in this culture of ours. And maybe it's the human culture generally, but I'll speak to this culture. And that is the very, very strong messages that women get that they must be smile a lot, and a whole set of behaviors that go along with this notion of sweetness that you were talking about. Inauthentic sweetness is hammered into women over and over. And it's taken up by the women as a way of staying safe in an unsafe world. And so a lot of the work that I do with my clients, and that I imagine we'll do with folks in our workshop, is to invite people to actually take a look at that and say, oh, to what extent is this still serving me? And to what extent is this mask that I took on to protect me no longer serving me and actually imprisoning me and hiding me from people I don't want to be hidden from, including myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me think about voice. I was talking with a friend from Australia who's spending a couple months in the US, and he said something about American women use a lot of baby voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, baby voice? And he was like, yeah, just listen for it. You'll start to notice it everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think the first person I noticed doing it was myself. And right. I don't know if I can do it now, but it's like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's do this. Hi. Mm-hmm. You hear it, right? It's very in here. And what's the point? It's to soothe. It's soothing. That's why I do it, to soothe the person I'm speaking to.
Right. Right. Lest you be seen as a threat.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because that would then put you in danger. At a very deep level, there's that belief. If I don't soothe this person I'm speaking to, I'm at risk.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes now I still do it as a signal, like with female friends, mostly, actually. Because it's a shared thing that we can both engage with and see each other in. And that feels okay. Feels good. Mm-hmm. But I'm a lot more aware of it, especially with men, because I don't like how it makes me feel when I catch myself doing it. I don't like that it makes me feel small and it makes me sound young.
It denies people the opportunity to actually see you and hear you in your authenticity, this mask. I think all of our masks do that. And if we're not conscious of them, we can inadvertently create walls that we actually, in our deepest heart's desire, do not want to create. But even with our closest people, it can create these barriers, particularly if we're not conscious.
Can I tell you what my most recent work has been around my own mask?
I would love to hear that, yeah.
I was noticing that I was having trouble with my clients in my sessions, accessing my curiosity, creativity, intuition, and my heart. And I was noticing that with friends or in collaboration with another practitioner, like when we worked together at the retreat, it was so much easier for me to access those things. In those situations when I'm just with friends or when I have a colleague, I feel like the pressure's not all on me. And so I can relax. But in my sessions, my one-on-one sessions, what was happening was I was ping-ponging back and forth between this one mask I have of the performer. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do a good job so that they're going to come back. I'm going to give them exactly what they came for. And when I couldn't hold that one up anymore, then I'd swing all the way into my youngest mask, which is the one where I just kind of leave or dissociate and go on autopilot. And ping-ponging between those two, there was no space for me to tap into my love, my creativity, my curiosity, my intuition. And so I processed what was happening, which was I wanted them to like me so that they would come back because I didn't want them to leave all the way down and down and down.
Right.
Image came up from very early elementary school of being rejected by a group of girls at recess and having to walk away alone and just stand by myself and wait. That image came up 4 or 5 times in different sessions, my own sessions. And each time it came up, I was like, I already worked on this. Why is this back? But each time it came up, I felt it more. Until the last time it came up where I could really actually feel how bad it felt. It really hurt. And that image, that memory to me, I think was a time where my mask was created. It was solidified. It was formed. I was so hurt. I showed up with this open heart. I wasn't met. And I decided I'm going to make sure this never happens again.
That's a classic example of the expression that we've both heard. You have to feel in order to heal. You have to feel to heal. You actually had to dive deep down and feel that pain that is underlying this protective mechanism in order to heal, so that you no longer needed that protective mechanism. Beautiful. Yeah. The beauty of the kind of work we can do in sessions with our practitioner is that we get this feedback from somebody skilled to spot masks that we can't see. I mean, you and I have been trained in how to spot and work with masks, but we still have our own, which is why both of us still see practitioners, because it's very, very difficult. It's why Michael Jordan needed a coach. It's the same principle. We all need that kind of reflection. And I have found a whole lot of benefit in working with my practitioner, just in terms of, on many levels, but particularly in terms of feeding back to me my mask. I remember an early session with her. She said, you're telling me a bunch of stuff that's troubling you, and you've got a big smile on your face while you tell me. That's kind of a disconnect between the words that are coming out of your mouth and what's on your face. Why don't you drop into telling me what's going on and let your face come along? I was like, well, because I was totally unaware. It was so automatic. I was totally unaware that I was doing that. But again, this just goes to the highlight the universality and invisibility of our own masks to ourselves, even if others around us can see them clearly, particularly the trained ones that we seek out.
Mm-hmm.
It's also one of the benefits of being in groups. Groups offer a great opportunity, whether it's a workshop or a retreat or group sessions, to feed back to us what our masks are. It's not surprising to me that my epiphany about my own mask came in a retreat with 7 of my closest friends. Mm-hmm. It's not surprising to me at all, given what I now know about masks and my own mask and masks generally. There's something about being in a group that feeds back to us information that is not available to us necessarily from inside our skull.
When you say feedback, what do you mean? I agree with you, but I'm not sure I quite am seeing what you're saying.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. If I am being inauthentic in a group, there is information out there in a group that I'm being inauthentic. And if I'm paying attention to what's going on in the group, or even if I'm not seeking to pay attention, somehow I'm going to get feedback that there's a disconnect in that group. And so then I get to see that. And it might be formal. It might be someone saying, you're showing up as fake to me, right? It might be something harsh and straightforward like that. Or it might be more subtle, that I might just notice that, why are we not connecting? And then if I take responsibility for that, why are we not connecting? Then I immediately might go to, well, what am I doing to generate this inauthentic connection between us? Mm-hmm. Or they're showing up as inauthentic. That may mean that I too am showing up inauthentic. So I think that's what I mean. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah. For me, I love the safety of a group. Mm-hmm. I really feel like I can go so much deeper in a group. My one-on-one work is so important too, but the big shifts for me are almost always in group, because I just feel so supported and held.
Right. In individual work, I'm paying my practitioner to not leave, right? So I can show up authentically, and I trust that she will not leave, because I'm at the end of the session, I will send her money. That's kind of the deal. But in group, I've got a bunch of peers, folks like me, just ordinary folks, not necessarily with even the training that I have, much less the professional commitment that my therapist has with me to stay and to call me out. And so the safety you mention is that it's safe for me to run experiments on what is it to be without my mask. And I run an experiment of authenticity, and then I look around the room and they're all still there, and nobody is throwing things at me in anger, and actually what I see is a connection in the room. And so I've just run a very important and safe experiment. Oh, I was vulnerable in a way I've never been before, and they did not leave. My deepest fear is unfounded. So the group can undermine that core fear that I'm unlovable,
Right.
and that people will leave if they only knew me.
Right. Right. It reminds me of the workshop we did together, the first one that I went to, when I was testing out this smile, no fake smiling resolution that I had made. And I remember kind of announcing it to the group at the beginning to help me feel safe. Hey guys, I'm doing this thing. I'm not going to fake smile. And even for you, Ronen, I'm not going to laugh at your jokes if I don't think they're funny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. What it is to actually be authentic with each other.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Because are you going to still like me if I don't give you that feedback that I think you're looking for?
Exactly. Will I go away if you don't soothe me, right, with that feedback? Oh, she laughs at my jokes. Great. And you hear that sometimes in couples. He laughs at my jokes. She laughs at my jokes, as though that's enough to sustain, when it's entirely possible that the person is simply putting on their "I'm going to laugh at his jokes" mask to be safe and to preserve the relationship. Yeah. I'm blessed that my partner, JP, if she doesn't get my jokes, she does not laugh at them. It's wonderful. All right, I need to go revisit that joke. Maybe I won't use that one again. So it's quite refreshing. It's a wonderful way to be in relationship.
That is nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have any masks that you would wear towards me? Have you noticed?
Towards you. Golly, we've had some really good heartfelt conversations with each other. So I feel like we're getting pretty good at dropping our masks with each other, increasingly good. I suspect I do, but it's the nature of masks that they're a little hard to spot. What do you think? Do you think I'm wearing masks when I'm with you? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
Gosh, now I'm on the spot.
Not my intention to put you on the spot, but I think you may have more information about this than I do, because masks are often invisible to the wearer of the mask.
It's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to answer that question, because I think if I were to perceive a mask in you, there would also be a lot of my own shit. Can I say shit here?
Sure.
Okay. Attached to that, so I think when I first met you, I thought, oh, this guy he's got kind of the guru air. He's right. Like he knows a lot. He wants me to know that he knows a lot. And, but I have that in me too. So me seeing that in you was partly me. And this is maybe the thing. It makes me feel like I want to compete with that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I learned over the years of leading groups, is that if I wanted vulnerability in the retreat or the workshop, it was incumbent upon me to show up vulnerable. And And then if I noticed that if there was not vulnerability in the workshop, if people weren't taking risks, then I needed to up my game.
Mm.
Because very often when we're at the front of the room, we as leaders of groups, we're setting the tone. In fact, almost always we're setting the tone. And if there's not vulnerability in the room, that comes back to me. And so that's just a signal to me, all right, it's time to up my disclosure. I'm clearly keeping something back for some reason. So, which I think is a little bit with us when we first met over lunch. It's like we're kind of both kind of checking each other out, and we don't have quite the same training background. We have the same general training, but okay, but what did she learn out there in Seattle? And it's different than what I've been learning here on the East Coast and all of that, and kind of checking it out. But I think the more we've gotten to know each other, the easier it's been for both of us to drop our masks. So we can have pretty bracing conversations with each other. I think the last one we had together was like, whoa, we're saying this to each other. Wow, that's great. I think a lot of the caution to kind of extend the answer to the question has to do with, yeah, and we talked about this a lot when you were over, and we were kind of talking about this retreat and our relationship as co-leaders, is there's a lot about this dynamic of man and woman, and particularly older man and younger woman, that is dicey on both sides, it seems to me. So there's a piece of my mask that has come up that is me trying not to be dangerous. Because that is in our culture, particularly at this time in our culture, it's easy for folks to kind of look at somebody who looks like me and draw certain conclusions about predator or dirty old man or whatever, particularly the work we do involving the body so much. Just as it's easy to look at somebody like you, who looks like you, and draw conclusions about that. And so there's this kind of a navigation between these images, to go back to that word, these images that people have about us, each of us, and that we have about us as we look through the eyes of other people looking at us. And so some of the masks that I've noticed myself navigating as you and I have gotten to know each other is, all right, so how can I break up this mask of having to be safe for you? And
how do you
well, I think what has been my go-to so far is to continually disclose what's actually going on with me. To kind of to blow that up. Actually, there's safety in disclosure as opposed to safety in masking, because I trust myself in this dynamic, this male-female dynamic that you and I have going on, that I trust who I am and where I am in my life. And I trust who you are and where you are in your life. And the more that you know me and the more that I know you, I think the more trustworthy we become for each other.
And when you say disclosure, are you talking about disclosure of your personal history, disclosure of a feeling in the present moment? Like what types of disclosures help you to break up your mask in this dynamic?
All of the above and more. I think the more fully known I am by you, the more authentic our relationship, the more we can both kind of drop our guard. And I very much want to drop my guard with you, and have since we met. I thought, oh, this is a person I can drop my guard with. And we've worked our way toward that. And I think that's a model for how it works generally in the world. Can I drop my guard with this person? And because there's always learning and always healing, I am not one to say that I have learned all I need to learn about my mask. I think I learn a lot about my mask every week. I learn a new dimension of what is preventing me from knowing and being known in the world. How about for you? What works for you in this dynamic? What has worked for you in this dynamic as we've gotten to know each other and dropped our masks increasingly?
I have been enjoying taking risks with you. So saying the things that feel scary to say. And what has helped me to feel really safe in that has been your willingness to engage, to continue to engage. So I feel fairly confident at this point that I could ask you almost any question or make an observation that might offend you or that I might think might offend you. Maybe it comes from my mask, maybe it comes from some wounded part of me, but that you can hold that, you can stay for that. It's that you stay that I really appreciate, that helps me to feel safe. Okay, I can try things here.
Right. That's funny. That's similar. There's in the first retreat you attended, there was a moment where you showed up so radically authentically. I realized that I could be honest with you. There was a sturdiness to you that I encountered in that the safety and risky opportunity in that retreat, that I felt who you were, and I said, oh, okay, this is a being I can be authentic with. Because frankly, I'm not sure that I can know that in the world. There are a lot of folks that I can't just say my truth to and not have them even hurt. And so there's a kind of an assessment of the safety, not just for me, but for the other person, of vulnerability, of my own vulnerability. And there was a moment early on when we got into that retreat, it was like, oh, okay, this is, and that's when I started thinking, well, we could work together. Because I,
what was the moment?
it was in your somatic work. Without getting into the details of that, because that's yours to disclose and not mine. But there was a moment in your.
I mind.
All right. Well, it was a moment working with the cube where we were opposite each other at the cube, and it was like, all right. We were meeting each other in that physical space of being on kind of opposite sides of the cube in a very high energy moment.
Yeah.
And I said, all right. This is not this is not as she might have presented herself to be. It's actually, you were in your full authenticity. That's what it was, is that you showed up in your full strength, your full power, your full authenticity. And then I could trust you as being able to hold my fullness and my authenticity. And at that moment, I felt, from that point on, I felt, okay, now let's explore this, because this is a place that we can take risks with each other in the service of others.
I would love to discuss, to relive that session with you sometime in conversation.
Oh, I would love that.
Because that was pivotal for me as well, in terms of building trust, but also personally. It was a really powerful session that I wasn't expecting.
Well, you showed up ready to take a risk. I mean, that was amazing. I mean, I was like, oh, she came to roll up her sleeves and actually get down to it. It was fabulous work you did. Mm.
Mm. Yeah. I remember the moment that you allowed me to lead was the moment where I had the first building block of trust for you.
Say more about that. Why was that impactful?
Because I wasn't expecting it. And I honestly think it was the only thing you could have done in that moment that would have actually enabled you to help me. I think it was exactly what I needed, and that you were able to adapt to that, to intuit that, and to, it felt like to me, humble yourself to that.
Yeah.
I felt I could trust you.
Yeah, I remember that moment. Yeah. It was, golly, in retrospect, it was quite an instinctive move, a choice. But as I unpack it in the rearview mirror, because it was several months ago, as I unpack it, I realized that it was a way of dismantling any image that you might have that I was one up, which is, I think, part of this. It's a part of the older-younger dynamic, and it's part of the male-female dynamic that I realized if we were going to get anywhere, I needed to unravel. Now, I realized this at an instinctive level, but I realized that I could not effectively serve you by adopting a more culturally expected role of the older wise man leading a younger woman through what he knew she needed. Right. It makes us quiver with yuck. Right. but there was something about that moment where it was quite apparent to me at an instinctive level that you needed to lead me and that I needed to follow you.
Oh, it felt so good.
Yeah.
It felt so good.
There's also a piece of tantric training in that. The Himalayan Tantra, in the lineage I learned it, which is to be distinguished from California Tantra, which is better sex through good breathing, is my way of dismissing California Tantra. But Himalayan Tantra, in the lineage in which I studied, one of the pieces of teaching that I received was, it was put this way: he follows her. And it really wasn't just men following women. It's the masculine energy, or as I've come to learn how to say it so it's not so gender specific, the linear energy follows the circular energy. And so I kind of was drawing, I think, instinctively on that tantric training to follow you. I certainly showed up with line energy, but my line energy was following your circular energy. And that called forth your line energy. And I essentially had to shift into my circular energy to call forth your line, which it felt to me at some level was what you really wanted to bring forth that day.
Yeah, and I remember we were facing each other on the cube, hitting face to face, looking at each other, making eye contact, and yelling. And we did that. We pushed against each other. I remember you were wearing socks and I was wearing bare feet. So
I had to take my socks off. You were pushing me across the room.
Yeah.
It's too slippery.
And then we brought our pelvises into it, and we were whacking it with our pelvises and yelling and making contact, which this is for another conversation, but was so healing for me. But I remember at one point asking you 2 questions. I don't know if you remember those questions.
No.
They felt so important to me. I asked you, do you see me? And I asked you, what do you want from me?
Yeah, again, at the instinctive level, certainly not planned. So tell me about the impact. Tell me what happened for you with those questions that was important to you.
Those are questions that I often wonder and never ask.
So even the asking was an act of vulnerability on your part.
And an act of power.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I was tremendously moved by the work you did that day. It was a powerful process. It was courageous, and I figured anybody with that access to that level of power and that courage, tacked on to what I already felt I knew about you, was your deep commitment to this work and to your the I would call it the texture of your heart, which is really connected to your own I would say erotic life force and to the life force of reality, which I already had a sense of from our earlier lunches and other conversations. It was like, oh, all right, now let's roll up our sleeves and do some work together. That's when I first started conceiving the idea of partnering with you on retreats and workshops. I also want to speak to the partnership piece of this, based on the most recent retreat that we facilitated together. What I got to experience there is how trustworthy your instincts are. I mean, I had a sense of that from our earlier encounters, but kind of side by side with you as we were working with individuals in that retreat, over and over again, your imp is spot on, over and over again. And I felt so comfortable just leaning into your instincts. It was great to be able to trust your native brilliance that comes naturally to you. Well, I don't want to call out any specific examples of people that were there. But you would have an instinct to touch one of our participants in a certain way, or to say something. And I remember just saying, "I trust you." Right? I would whisper, because it was an uncertain environment for you. It was an uncertain environment for you. It was a retreat that I've led many, many times, and you've only attended one. And so you were making sure that you didn't step on any toes and that you were doing the right thing. But over and over, I seem to recall several times during the course of that retreat, I would kind of see you leaning into something, or maybe even whispering an idea to me, and then my response over and over being, "I trust you," because I do. I trust you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So why should people thinking about our May 24th retreat come? Like, why not just go on with their masks? What harm would there be, or what will they miss out on if they don't, either through this means or some other means, start to address unconscious masks?
I think for me, it's a feeling of aliveness. I have had periods in my life where I have gone through long times of feeling really low. And like I didn't really want to be here. Not like suicidal, but just, if I died, that would be okay. Other times where I've been anxious, scared, really somatically anxious, just not comfortable in my body. I think when we wear our masks and they're not conscious, we betray ourselves. We betray ourselves without realizing that we're doing it. There's some way, to me, in which the mask is not compatible with boundaries. for me at least. And boundaries are so essential for connection. Because if I'm not holding my boundary with a person, I'm not being authentic with them. If I'm not being authentic with them, I'm not with them, even if I'm physically there.
Right. In a sense, it sometimes seems to me that masks are generated when we really are feeling a need for boundary but don't know how to access it. I love that connection that you just made there. Our masks seem like a poor and ineffective substitute for authentic, strong boundaries. Yeah, I've been recommending this workshop to my clients who I think the reason they're signing up is because they see that what we're working on in session has at least in part to do with boundaries. So very often I'm working with relationships, and at least one half of it. I do some couples work, but not much lately, just by the luck of the draw. But relationships are still being worked on in these individual sessions. And I have clients who are learning how to be more authentic than they have been ever in their relationship, ever.
Yeah.
And the work we've done has started to help them see, oh, this is how I grew up, smiling and being sweet and not asking for what I want and not saying what is true for me just to be safe, to preserve the relationship, because of this belief that if I'm actually speaking my truth, it'll end the relationship. To which my secret conversation to myself, I don't typically say this, is if speaking your truth is going to end the relationship, you might want to end the relationship. But but it may not. It probably won't. It probably will spice up your relationship.
Right.
But even after you go through that uncomfortable period of actually revealing yourselves to each other, your partner wants to leave, then it might be a good thing. It might not actually be love that you two have created. It might be some other kind of relationship, but it certainly can't be authentic love of the sort that I believe all of us want at our core.
Yeah, and also to sing and dance and play and cry and rage.
In relationship. How amazing is that, to be in a relationship where you can have access to all of those emotions? So many of us grew up in households where you couldn't own these emotions, else you'd be sent to your room or worse. And to be in a relationship that is so transparent and so loving that you can have your emotions and so responsible that you're not kind of blaming the other person for your emotions, and therefore kind of lashing out at them. How freeing is that kind of a relationship to have? I mean, in our household, when one of us is enraged for whatever reason at what's going on in our lives, or whatever it is, we both feel quite comfortable grabbing a bat out of this closet that's behind me and going into the bedroom and using that as a cube and just screaming and whacking the bed until the energy of rage is out of our body, and the other partner is saying, "Oh, good. I'm glad he or she is actually doing that."
Good.
As opposed to, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Or, so and that's another piece about the mask that I don't want to leave untouched here, is that a lot of the masks that I've dealt with, that we deal with as a species, is not just dressing up and looking nice for each other. It sometimes comes in the form of playing the victim. And that comes up a lot as a dimension of masky behavior, to kind of I am somehow safer, at least in my own mind. I might not actually be safer, but in my mind, if I can generate a victim story about what's happening here, then I can start to wear that as a mask. And that's a lot of the mask that I work with some of my clients, is this, oh, life has been doing this to me, or my partner's been doing this to me, or my workplace has been doing this to me. And a lot of the work is to expose that dimension of mask. Mask comes in a lot of forms, and we've only touched on a couple of them today.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a pretty good range of stuff. Have I left anything out? Have you left anything out? What else should we talk about, if anything?
I mean, there's always more, but
as well.
I feel pretty complete.
Yeah.
I'd love to do.
Yeah, let's do some more. Let's do
This
some
was
more.
fun.
All right, Christine, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you,
Always.
Ronen. It's good to talk to you.